Hi everyone. So in today's lecture, I'm going to talk about how to write the descriptive summary and how to do descriptive analysis. But before we start that, I first wanted to show you when you download the NSCH 2019 data file, it will be downloaded as a zip folder. So if you are to open the zip folder, you will see that this is the data set, this is the code book, this is the guide to topics and questions. However, when you are running the SAS code, make sure that you do not copy this path because this path has a .zip in it, which means that this is a zip folder and SAS does not recognize this. So what you will need to do is you will need to right click on this, extract all, and when you extract all, it will form a new file, and then you can name that new file as NSCH. And once you go in it, then you have to copy paste this particular path, okay, because there is no .zip over here, and this is your data file, and then you can store all the other files in this particular folder as well. So starting with SAS, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull up the SAS file. So this is the SAS file, and in this SAS file, as you know, that NSCH gives you the format file which I just now showed you. So this is the create format file. Once you open this file, you will see that there are already codes written inside this. So, and there are libname statements also. So you simply have to go back, copy paste this, right click, copy, pull it down, and then paste it over here, as well as paste it in the libname where it says library. Second thing you will need to change is you will need to change the library is equal to NSCH, or you can keep library is equal to library, and then you can go ahead and simply run this entire content over here, and once it runs, you will see that in the libraries there is a NSCH folder which is created, and within the NSCH folder over here we have the particular data set that we wish to work with. Now before we start working with this data set, we should always subset the data. So even before we start analyzing the data, it is always a good idea to subset the data. So to subset the data, you can simply write over here data NSCH and then write set, and you have to copy this particular name, which, yeah, you can copy this way and you can paste it over here, and then go ahead and run this particular code. Okay, now when you run this code, but before I run this, let me show you one more thing. In the work folder there is nothing right now, correct? So now once we run this, you will see that okay, it shows that the file does not exist. And why did this happen? Because I did not write the NSCH file name. So whenever you are running the set statement, you have to specify where that particular file is located. So what mistake did I do here? That this data set is within a file. That is why SAS did not read it. So you have to tell SAS that you have to set it within the NSCH data set. Now let's run it again. And this time it did run, correct? So it does show me that there were 29,433 variables. Now if I click on the work folder, there I have my working file, which is exactly the same as the original file that was downloaded. I have simply changed the name of the file. Now coming to descriptive analysis. Now for starting descriptive analysis, the best way to start it is to first look at the SAS codebook. So again over here I'm using the 2019 National Survey of Children's Health. Now, if we keep scrolling down to the table of contents, you will see that there are several variables in here. And you all use this codebook for your assignment too, where you'll pick an exposure variable and an outcome variable. So it has several variables, including health insurance coverage, healthcare access, and many more. One point that I wanted to make here is that just because it says over here that these are the outcome measures, that does not mean that we have to pick our study outcome from these variables only. No, it just means that these variables were the outcome measures of the survey. So as I said, each survey is conducted with a specific study question in mind, and based on the study question of the National Survey of Children's Health, they had these particular outcomes, which is 14 to 25. So it's not necessary that we should pick our outcome from this. If we are able to find an exposure and outcome association between any of the other variables which also exist in each of the headings that you see here, you can go ahead and use those variables as your exposure and outcome variables. Okay, so please keep this particular thing in mind. So after reviewing the table of contents, what I thought was I want to work on a physical activity as the exposure and functional difficulties, which you see over here as the outcome. So based on this, I did a little bit of search, and then I thought that not many studies have been done on this particular topic. So I would like to study, is there an association between physical activity and functional difficulties among children? Now, keeping this particular research question in mind, let's look at what variables can I work with. So I already saw there is a physical activity variable and also there is a functional difficulties variable, but we need to see what each variable consists of. So let's just click on this physical activity variable, and it brings me to this page where it shows me that this was the question that was asked during the past week: on how many days did this child exercise, play a sport, or participate in physical activity for at least 60 minutes. Okay, and over here the denominator is 6 to 17 years of age, and this was the response variable. One more thing I wanted to say is whenever you're checking the variable, it's always a good habit to also check the SAS syntax and annotation so that we know how that variable was coded. So over here they have taken the age variable and limited the collection of information on physical activity only in children 6 to 17 years of age. And these were the responses: 0 days, 1 to 3 days, 4 to 6 days, and every day. So this looks like a good variable to work with, but I think we should explore more. So the best way to explore more variables is you simply do Control F, and when you do Control F, you can simply go ahead and type in your particular variable that you were looking for. So let's just type physical. Now if we type physical, it's going to show us every single page that has physical, as a heading. So let's just try activity and let's see what it shows us. So it shows us this, and then it shows us a lot more variables. So this is also not something that we are looking for. So the best is that we go back to the table of contents, and in the table of contents again look at physical activity. So on page 20 we already looked at this particular variable, which is 6 to 17 years of age. Now I'm simply going to keep scrolling down until I see more variables which have the title of physical activity or anything that is related to physical activity. So over here I see physical, but this is the physical health status of the mother and father. So we don't want that. So I'm going to keep scrolling down because I did see variables over here. Physical activity in age 6 to 11 years old and physical activity age 12 to 17 years old. So let's explore what these variables have and how these variables differ in the title. The previous title was 6 to 17 years of age. However, this particular variable has split this age group into two different age groups. So let's click on this. And this also asks the same question. However, in the previous question, we saw there were more more factors included in the question, such as playing in park and other, whereas over here it's a simple and straightforward question where it says the percentage of children ages 6 through 11 who are physically active for at least 60 minutes per day, right? And this was coded with the help of this particular variable over here. So again I'm going to scroll down, and what I see is in this particular adolescent age group, 12 to 17 years of age, the same question was asked. Again, 60 minutes of activity, children 12 to 17 years of age. Now, looking at my exposure, what I am seeing is that the age group over here is 6 to 17 years of age, and the age group of the entire data set is probably 0 to 17 years of age. So let's first go and check that is this true? Is the age group of the entire data set 0 to 17 years of age? So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to run some proc frequencies where we will be able to see if there is the age group that we want to include in our data set or not. So over here, if I run this, then it gives us an output where we can see that the lower limit of this age group is 0 and the upper limit is 17 years of age. However, the physical activity variable was collected from 6 to 17 years of age. And also looking at the question, it does make a lot more sense because children less than 5 years of age might not be as physically active. Therefore, we won't be able to see 60 minutes of physical activity either on a daily basis or 1 to 3 days in that age group. However, we can see that or we can examine that in the 6 to 17 years of age group. So considering all these factors, then children less than 5 years of age become the exclusion criteria for the study based on a rationale that I just now provided, that we will not be able to see a specific amount of activity, which is 60 minutes of activity in those children. And also because the question in this particular secondary data set, which are related to physical activity, are asking 60 minutes of physical activity. So based on these two reasons, which we can write in the paper, we can actually form an exclusion criteria excluding children between 0 to 5 years of age. However, the age variable which I have used over here, this looks like a continuous variable, right? There are no categories over here. So I don't want to use a continuous variable. I want to see if there is a categorical variable or not. So again, to see if there is a categorical variable or not, I'm again going to try my luck and see if it shows me any age variable. So over here it's showing me physical activity age. So I want 2 to 3 groups. So let's see age 3, and there I have age in 3 categories, which is 0 to 5 years, 6 to 11 years, and 12 to 17 years. Now let's see, does it show me any more? Yeah. So this is the variable that I'm looking for. What is the child's age? Okay, 3 age groups, 0 to 5, 6 to 11, and 12 to 17. And this particular variable, age3 underscore 19, was actually recoded with the help of this continuous variable. So this saves us a lot of work, because if we want to work with categorical variables, this particular data set has already done that for us, and we simply can go ahead and use this age3 underscore 19 variable. However, I do not want to include children who are less than 5 years of age. Therefore, I'm going to prepare another data set wherein you will see over here that I'm applying an exclusion criteria, wherein I am subsetting this data set and deleting this particular age group, which is less than 5 years of age. Okay, but how do I know that one is equal to less than 5 years of age? I will first run frequency on this and show you, so that you're able to know. So over here we can see that this is the first age group, this is the second age group, and this is the third age group. Again, going back to the SAS code book, you see this is how it was formatted or recoded, where one is 0 to 5 years old. So therefore, when I'm applying my exclusion criteria, I'm going to tell SAS that if age is in the first age group, then please delete those many participants, because they should not be included in my sample. So let's go ahead and run this particular code. Now you will see that the original data had 29,433 observations, and now this entire sample population which we are going to work with has 21,259 observations. So how many participants did we lose? Again, let's go back to the results section. We lost close to 8,000 participants, right? Now, what is the second thing that we need to check before we go ahead with this analysis? Is there enough power with this particular sample size to conduct these analysis? Now, what percentage of data did we lose when we deleted the 8,000? Not a lot of data, right? It's not like we are losing 50% of data. So the sample size has not decreased to 15,000 or 14,000. So this is still a pretty good sample size, and I feel it will give a pretty good power also to conduct analysis. So therefore, we can confidently go ahead and work with this particular data set. Now, I talked about physical activity and I talked about age groups, right? So I talked about my exposure, which is physical activity, and my exclusion criteria, which I applied based on the age groups, providing a rationale for it. Now let's look at the outcome variable. The outcome variable that I'm interested in is functional difficulties, right? So over here, there is a variable, one or more functional difficulties. So this is the variable. Yeah. So here is the variable, one or more functional difficulties. And the question is, Does this child have one or more functional difficulties from a list of 12 difficulties? And there were a lot of options, which included almost 12 options, including breathing, coordination, dressing, running errands alone, and so on. However, you can see in the denominator, the information collected in this using this particular question is in the age group 0 to 17. But do we really need to worry about this? No, because we have already applied our exclusion criteria. Therefore, we don't have to worry even if this outcome variable was collected in more participants, because we have excluded that particular group of participants from our entire data set. So as we scroll down, you will see a lot of different variables wherein there was coding done to get this particular variable of breathing, this particular variable of swallowing, and so on. So again, this does look like a good variable to be included in the study as an outcome variable, especially because in spite of it being a combination of a list of 12 difficulties, the response categories are not 12 over here. The response categories have been recoded and categorized into three, which is the first one is does not have difficulties, second one is one functional difficulty, and third one is two or more functional difficulties. And this looks like a very good response category to be included in a epidemiological study. So therefore, diff2 more underscore 19 becomes my outcome variable. Now again, whenever we pick exposure and outcome variable, it is always a good idea to run frequencies on them so that we can see what is the distribution of the variable and how does it actually look like in comparison to the groups. So over here we can see that there was no difficulties, almost 70%, one difficulty almost 20%, and then 11 to 12% is two or more difficulties. But over here we see there is a frequency missing, which is equal to 24. Now I did talk about imputation of missing values in the previous lectures. However, a frequency missing of 24 is not really going to make a very huge difference in the estimates or in the results that we will get from this particular study. Therefore, we don't really have to worry about this missing frequency of 24. Okay. And now what we can do is we have our exposure variable of physical activity. So again, going back to this particular code book, there were several variables that we saw that were related to physical activity. However, we would like to see which variable is the one that we should include, right? So over here there is physical, oral, and functional status, under which this was one category that we saw. However, this is not splitting this variable into the two categories of children and adolescent. It was some other variable that was doing this. So as we scroll down, again, going back to that, this is the particular variable that we are looking for. And when I click on this, I see that this should be the variable that we can work with, right? So let's go back and again, just run some descriptives on it so that we know how is the response category distributed. Again, over here you will see a missing frequency of 200. Again, 200 missing frequency does not make a large difference. If it's 2000, then we really have to think about it. But if it's 200, it does not give you incorrect, or it does not give you an error in your estimates. So over here, when you see physical activity, again, these are the four categories and this is the distribution, where the least amount is 0 days and then the most amount is 1 to 3 days. Most number of participants were in 1 to 3 days. Now, why is it important that we look at this distribution of these categories as to how many participants are there in each particular category? That is because when we further go ahead and run some regression models, we will want to decide which category should be our reference category, right? So how do we decide which category should be the reference? It is always a good idea to take the least number of participants, which is the smallest n, to be the reference category. So therefore, it's always a good idea to run frequencies and see how much missing is there and how the distribution of the participants is there among the response categories of that particular variable. So then that's it. This is done. We have our exposure variable, physical activity. We have our outcome variable, functional difficulties or functional limitations. Now going ahead, we have to decide which other variables apart from age will be in our inclusion criteria. So we excluded one age group, but we included the other two age groups, right? Which is 6 to 11 and 12 to 17. And as I said in the previous lecture, that when we are including, we should include all demographic characteristics. So that is very, very important. So again, going back to the code book, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and explore some more demographics. So age is one demographic that we took care of. Now another one that we should look at is sex or gender, right? So over here, it does have a variable sex of the child. Now let's go ahead and see if it actually gives us, yes, over here, sex of the child. So let's click on this. So this looks like a good variable to be included. What is the child's sex? And again, the age group over here is 0 to 17, but we have already excluded the age group that we don't want to work with. And one is male and two is female. So again, this looks like a good variable that can be included. So sex underscore 19 can be included as a variable. So going back to the SAS, I have included over here the first variable, which is age 3 underscore 19, then sex underscore 19. So age and gender is done. The third is race ethnicity. So that is another demographic variable that comes to mind that should be included in order to describe the basic characteristics of the participants. So let's just go ahead and first type in, let's see what they have in ethnicity. Okay, so what is the child's race and ethnicity? So this seems to be a good variable because it looks like it includes both race as well as ethnicity. And the response categories are Hispanic, white, non-Hispanic, then black, non-Hispanic, other. Now what I see over here is there is other. I'm not sure what other is because when we are writing this in the paper, we need to explain each category or each response category also. We cannot just write other. What does other include? So again, just scroll down, and as you scroll down, you will see how this variable was coded. 1 is Hispanic, 2 is white non-Hispanic, 3 is black non-Hispanic, 4 is other or multiracial non-Hispanic. So, okay, again, these four categories are pretty the standard usually used categories for defining the race ethnicity of any population. So we can go ahead and include this in our study. So what I did is I have included this particular variable. Okay, so what I have included, you can see, is race Asia underscore 19. However, over here, did we come across Asian as a race ethnicity? Sorry, race, not ethnicity, but race. We did not. Okay, so let's just go ahead and type in that as well because we do want to include that and it is right after the previous variable. So over here you can see that this is the race ethnicity variable, which also includes Asian. So this looks like a better variable compared to the previous variable because we are not excluding any population. We want to include all populations based on whatever we are studying. Now let's say you were studying some other research question, like there are some studies which research the incidence of breast cancer in Hispanic Latino women, right? So if that is your research question, then you should certainly not use a variable which gives you race ethnicity, but you should instead use a variable which gives you ethnicity only, such as Hispanic and non-Hispanic, which we saw in the previous variable. However, we are not focusing on any such research question. Therefore, I would like to include Asian in here as well. And so instead of including the previous variable, I actually want to include race Asia underscore 19 in this study. So therefore, I went ahead and included this particular variable. So what I did is, similarly, I went on exploring the SAS codebook to see which other variables I would like to include. And I went ahead and included this particular variable, which is the language spoken at home. This variable, which is a socio-economic variable. This is basically the federal poverty level, which is a proxy variable, or which is a reflection of the income bracket in which the families are, or in which the child's family is. Next, I also included adult education. Now, why did I include this variable? Because I thought it was important and it may have some kind of an effect on the outcome, which is functional difficulties, and it may be related to physical activity also. And even if it is not, I just want to use that variable to describe my population. Next, you will see over here, I have put park underscore 19. So what is park underscore 19? Let's go back to the SAS code book. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up and again scroll through the table of contents, because now I am done with the inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria. Now I want to see which confounders should I be considering, and I want to include at least 3 confounders, right? So when I think about physical activity, what is the first thing that comes to mind as far as a child's physical activity is concerned? That children play in parks, right? So the first thing that came to my mind is I should look if there is a variable that talks about any information that is related to the number of parks that exist in the residence where the child lives. And as I kept scrolling down over here, I came to a variable which is neighborhood safety and support, and there are neighborhood amenities also, right? So again, I can click on those variables, or I can simply write park, and the first thing that pops up is neighborhood amenities. So the question is, in this child's neighborhood, how many amenities are present? Parks, recreation centers, sidewalks, or libraries? Now, are sidewalks or libraries in any way related to physical activity? No, they are not. So, is this a good question to be included if we want to look at parks in the neighborhood? I don't think so. Also, the response categories over here is 1 amenity, 2 amenities. And if we happen to include this, then in the paper, we will further have to go ahead and explain what did 1 amenity include, what did 2 amenities include, and so on. So I don't think this is a good variable, mainly for the reason because the question includes sidewalks and libraries. So I'm not going to include this particular variable. I'm going to keep exploring for more such other variables. So let's just, yeah. So over here it shows me that there is a variable children who live in neighborhood with a park or playground, which is park underscore 19. So is there a park in the neighborhood where the child lives? And the response is yes and no. And then right below it, there is a variable where it was asked the children who live in neighborhood with recreation centers such as community center or boys and girls club. Again, the response variable was yes and no. However, in this I cannot see what age group was included, right? So I'm just going to copy this particular variable, paste it in this find box and click on next, and here it gets me again back to uh, the same particular question that we were looking at, right? So let's try this one more time, which is park underscore 19, and then click OK. So it brings me back to the same question. However, this park underscore 19 is actually this question K10 Q12. Okay, so I have to look at this question. However, this K10 Q12 is a question that was asked related to parks. So first, let's see, are we able to find it in this particular SAS codebook? So in this particular SAS codebook, I do not see any further information as to what this question was. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to this particular PDF, which is Guide to Topics and Questions, and I'm going to copy paste this K10 Q12 variable and press enter, and there you go. So this was the question. In your neighborhood, are there a playground or park? So this is the question that was asked, and this is exactly the question that I was looking for. I only want to know, was there a park or a playground? I do not want any additional information such as sidewalks or libraries, right? So which means that I can include park underscore 19, or if you choose, you can use this particular variable name also. And I would also like to include information on recreation centers. So the question on recreation centers was this: in your neighborhood, is there a recreation center, community center, or boys and girls club, right? So we can see that we can actually use these two variables in our SAS. So therefore I went ahead and I included the park underscore 19. The next variable is the recreation center variable. So again, let's first, always whenever you're trying to find variables, first try to find them in the SAS codebook, and then in the codebook, if you see that there is no detailed information, then you can go back to the guide to topics and questions and try to find information on that particular variable. So over here, the recreation center, the question was K10 Q13, right? So again, going back to the guide to topics and questions, we already read this question, right? K10 Q13. So this looks like a good variable to be included. So therefore, again, I went ahead and I included it. So what else comes to mind when we think about physical activity, right? So even as adults, when we go out to jog, what is the first thing that we look for? We look for, is it a safe place to do any kind of physical activity? So therefore, even when parents send their child to play outside in the playground, they will always look out for their child's safety, right? So therefore, safety is associated with physical activity, and safety can be associated with functional difficulties also, because if the neighborhood is not safe, then the child may actually end up having more falls, more accidents, and eventually that can lead to functional difficulties. So, again, whenever we are thinking of a confounder, we have to find a reasoning, either some kind of logical reasoning or biological mechanism where this confounder is associated with the exposure as well as it is associated with the outcome. So therefore, neighborhood safety is another variable which I included. Again, I'll go back to the SAS code book, and this time I will scroll up to this particular table of contents where there is a heading of neighborhood safety and support, and over here I see supportive neighborhood. So safe neighborhood or supportive neighborhood. So first let's look at supportive neighborhood. Does this child live in a supportive neighborhood? Go for help, children 0 to 17 years of age. And then if I scroll down, in safe neighborhood, I see that the question is, how much do you agree that this child is safe in your neighborhood? However, in the response categories, there is definitely agree, somewhat disagree. So this seems like a Likert scale, right? So this is a Likert scale. There is no definitive yes and no. There is maybe also. Somewhat agree sounds like maybe. So looking at an epidemiological study, I do not think I would like to include a Likert scale variable which has somewhat agree and somewhat or definitely disagree. So rather than including this variable, I would instead choose to include this variable, because if you look at this variable, it was actually made from a combination of two variables, wherein if we read this note for data users, it shows us that the responses were derived from three statements. People in this neighborhood help out each other, watch out for each other, and also when they encounter difficulties, they go to help in their community. So this is a very good variable to be included, because if the neighborhood is supportive, then the neighborhood is comparatively safe. We can make that assumption, right? So instead of including the previous variable, I am going to include this variable, because in this variable, if you scroll down, you will see that it was made from a combination of two different variables. So this does look like a good variable to be included as a confounder. So therefore I went ahead and I included that also. And lastly, I've included the actual exposure variable, and difficulties 2 or more is my outcome variable. So this is the last variable which we need to explore. So let's go ahead and see what this difficulty 2 or more variable includes, and is that the only variable that we have available to work with as an outcome variable, or are there more variables? So over here, one or more functional difficulties. So again, I'll click on this, and I will scroll up maybe. So this shows severe conditions, and if I keep scrolling down, it gets me to one or more functional difficulties. So I already discussed this, how this variable was formed. So again, that completes our exploration of the SAS codebook, and how we can use the SAS codebook to actually form our epidemiological study. So when you are working on your particular group projects, when you are picking up an exposure variable and an outcome variable, this is how you should go about digging in deeper into this particular data set with the use of the SAS codebook, as well as running frequencies, and then deciding as a group which variables do you want to work with. So this completes the inclusion criteria. And in the next video, I will go ahead and show you how to actually format a table in which we can populate the descriptive statistics, and then how to summarize those descriptive statistics. But for this video, this will be it. Thank you.